WNST town here this week during the long bye week as I will make my way to Green Bay and Lambeau Field this Sunday. You'll be following all that we do out on our Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, social media, and other places. And, of course, the baseball general managers meetings going on this week, which opens the whole can of worms about the Orioles, the offseason, Dan Duquette, Buck Showalter. No one covers baseball or the business of baseball better than this guy. He was around at the World Series. I was trying to track him down from L.A. to Houston, back to L.A., to New York, and back to L.A. again. Eric Fisher joins us now, longtime writer at the Washington Times, now with the Sports Business Journal. And, of course, you can find him at Eric Fisher, SBJ. That stands for Sports Business Journal. He is the MLB media digital technology writer out online as well, and a guy I love to talk baseball with. And more than anything, a real connoisseur of all things Peter Angelos, the Lerners, and the Masson deal. He's the guy that sits in those courtrooms. And, first off, I'll begin this, Eric, because we'll get to Masson, we'll get to Peter, we'll get to Adam Jones and Manny Machado and money and all that stuff. But let me just first say welcome in. And I know you were very busy running around chasing baseball, real baseball games the last couple of weeks. It was a pretty good year for Major League Baseball. I think from a PR standpoint, from a money standpoint, from a fan interest, from getting new stars into the game, and certainly new blood with the Houston Astros. I thought it was weird, two National League teams playing for the World Series, but what do I know, Eric?
Yeah, us old-timers are used to the old Nolan Ryan, J.R. Richard, Tequila Sunrise, Houston Astros with the colorful jerseys and all that. So, yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but they're really a great story, and it sort of gives hope to a lot of other teams that because they broke it down to the studs and built it back up again very patiently, very slowly, had 300 lost seasons in a row, had attendance nearly cut in half, and then had to build it back up very, very slowly, but they did. And with enough resources and enough patience and enough mental acumen, teams can get there, and it sort of provides some hope for some other clubs.
Well, and in the case of the Astros doing it the right way and all that stuff, part of the right way was bringing Verlander in, right? And you and I sit here every summer, because I know I had you on back in June, and we talk about the trading deadline and how it's going to affect things and who it's going to help and who the big winners are going to be. Both of those teams were big winners. I mean, Darvish not in the end, but obviously Verlander as good a pickup at the trading deadline as we're ever going to see in this lifetime, right?
It's a really good template that you build a core among your own drafted players, maybe some trades, but you have your own sort of base core. And in the case of the Astros, I'm speaking of people like Correa and Altuve and Springer and so forth. And then these free agencies, they're not the core. They're not they should not be the core, not what the Yankees did back in the 80s and so forth, that they become sort of that final piece to get you over the top. And that's exactly how the Astros use Verlander.
All right, let's get into the Orioles here. I know you're dying to talk about the Masson money and all that stuff, but I don't know that we can intelligently talk about the Orioles offseason or the Nationals without talking about sort of the missing $250 million now that the Orioles have run up this tab as to whether they're going to keep the money or whether the Nationals are going to get part of the money. And I'm sure it really does play into the old man's mind and if his kids have any input in any of this. But the Orioles are about to go into this period where they never seem to win because they never seem to have a really long-term strategy. Buck and Duquette are dangling. Machado, Adam Jones, Brad Brock, Zach Britton, all dangling going into this year. And really the future of the organization is dangling with all of this money disputed. And in my mind, Peter's going to have to write a big check at some point or his heirs to the Nationals. I know the Lerner family feels that way. I know that most people in Major League Baseball probably feel that way. But for now, that money's on Peter's side of the fence, and the questions are going to come up. What are you going to do with Scope? What are you going to do with Machado? What are you going to do with Buck and Duquette to show the future of this organization? Because the one thing we all can agree on, the Red Sox and Yankees are now back, and that unto itself is not only a problem for the Orioles, that's a problem for the Blue Jays and the Devil Rays as well.
Yeah, so a lot of different pieces there. Just to sort of give the quick update on where Masson is, big surprise, we're in another holding pattern. We had this ruling back in the late spring, early summer. The hearing was in the spring, and we heard a few months later, essentially a split decision, and actually first piece of good news for the Nationals and really in the entire run of this case, that sort of part one, there was sort of really two separate rulings in the New York State Court of Appeals. Number one, the original award to the Nationals by that internal MLB arbitration panel, that's gone. That no longer exists, and we sort of are back to zero now. So then part two, where does this thing go next? Who's going to decide how this money gets distributed and split? The ruling by a narrower margin was that it could go back to this same internal arbitration panel, the Revenue Sharing Definitions Committee, to get specific. And so this is what Masson is now appealing yet again. They've been arguing for years now that is basically a rooked game, that there's no point. This has got to go to a fully neutral, independent third party to mediate. And so they're fighting right now, going back to the RSDC yet again. And so we're waiting for papers. There'll be hearings. And so the wait goes on. To your other point about the free agents, there's not a lot of. This is not a robust class this year. The big classes next year when Machado and Bryce Harper and so forth become available. But it's also important to remember that no team should be crying poverty. Because what also happened this summer is we had this big deal for BAMTech, and this is a spinoff of MLB Advanced Media. Disney took majority control of this in two separate transactions, the second one happening this past summer for over $1.5 billion, straight distribution back to the owners. So every individual team is in the process of getting another check for more than $50 million, above and beyond all of the other standing operations across the league and in their respective markets. So this big payday is coming to all of these owners, so there should be no problem paying for players when they become available.
Well, all that being said, there are payroll issues, and all the teams are trying to hold things down. And in the case of the Orioles, getting better through pitching this offseason is what they're going to preach. I don't expect them to deal Manny Machado. I don't expect them to deal Adam Jones. I don't expect them to deal Britton, although they tried during the summer. I don't expect any of that. I would think that, I've been around the old man here long enough, as have you, following all of this before the Washington Nationals, back when they were the Montreal Expos. I know, when I was doing the Peter Principles, much of your work was widely quoted, including your scoop on the $75 million payment that came to Peter Angelos out of the front door of the thing back in 2005. There's been a lot of money floating around, but to your point, how do you get better this offseason? How do you take one last run at it for an almost 90-year-old owner? And I know Illich was trying that in Detroit, RIP to him. But, Peter would like to win here, but I don't know that they're capable of buying anything this offseason that's going to look like frontline starting pitching in this division.
Yeah, and there's not, again, this is a weak class. There's not a lot out there. The best thing that, we've got out there are the Jake Arrietas of the world, which would be sort of an interesting full circle thing if that were ever to happen.
I don't think Jake Arrieta wants any part of this. I mean, all he's ever done is badmouth this place since he left it, right? Literally.
That's why I'm being a little flip here. But, yeah, totally agree. But I think the bottom line is the Orioles do need some better pitching, and they need to draft better. And I think it's not, the cupboard's not bare. This is not a full tear down to the studs thing like I was talking about before with the Astros. There is some talent there. But
the question is, should it be a teardown, though, right? I mean, in other places, they would say, we can't win next year. Let's go get 4 players for Machado, right? Like the Chris Sale deal last year, to say, well, we're going to bring in 7 or 8 prospects and deal away 3 or 4 of these guys and do that rebuild. That's something I don't think the Orioles have any belly for, even though, quite frankly, if I bought the team tomorrow morning, that's what I would do.
It's interesting because the Chicago White Sox are another sort of analog here, I think, and they were sort of running in neutral for a little bit, that they were sort of stuck in that 75 to 80 win kind of morass, not really going up or going down, and then they finally blew it all open and made a ton of trades, and they've got now a ton of picks and a ton of prospects, and they're building around that and Moncada, and that's really their sort of story to the market there. The question is, are the Orioles that bad? I mean, this is not, we're not that far removed from a playoff team here, a multiple playoff team here, and there is some talent there. and again, it's being in the middle is like the worst because you don't know whether you're up or down, obviously, and so there's some hard decisions there, and I hear what you're saying. I'm just not necessarily convinced that the cupboard is fully bare here. Could they, is the talent potentially there with some other good acquisitions, some other smart moves to maybe sneak into the wild card race? Potentially.
Well, I think the biggest issue for them in the offseason, something they could get done, would be scope, right? I mean, they could look at scope right now and say, here's 80, here's 100 million, we want to keep you. He may be thinking, well, is Machado going to be here? Can we win? Who's going to pitch for this team? But this is a strategy that works when you have a burgeoning superstar player, that this would have been what they should have done with Machado had he not had back-to-back knee injuries that kept him out. We all know how Mr. Angelos feels about the medical report, but Scope, to me, is the guy that if you're going to win in 2020, 21, 22, you better be thinking about doing it around him at this point.
I would agree, and it's really interesting because he's become a whole other player, well beyond I and a lot of other people thought he would be. That he's sort of gone from sort of serviceable major leaguer into something much more than that. And I completely agree in terms of both competitively and then making a statement to your market in terms of ticket sales and marketing and so forth. It would really be sort of a pretty good show of faith to try to lock that down and designate him as one of your cornerstone pieces.
Eric Fisher is our guest. He is Eric Fisher, SBJ, on Twitter. He's at the Sports Business Journal as their MLB media digital technology writer, and just back from the West Coast several times. All of our programming here today brought to you by our friends at Deli-ish over on Wise Avenue in Dundalk. New York-style delis, all the sandwiches you'd want, whether it's a Reuben, turkey sandwich, corned beef, you want a club sandwich. They also have some legit specialty sandwiches like the curly fry or tasty pickles. They cater in for the holidays as well. You can learn more at delibaltimore.com or find them down on Wise Avenue in Dundalk. Deli-ish, I think the name says it all. Lee Tessier and his team at Keller Williams American Premier Realty have been selling more homes than anybody in Hartford and Baltimore County. Find out why. They're going to get your house sold, and there's nothing to risk ever with Lee. His team's going to get your house sold. Learn more at leetessier.com. That's Lee Tessier and his team at Keller Williams American Premier Realty. Eric Fisher's our guest. Eric Fisher, SBJ. The way to find him out at Sports Business Journal. The business of baseball here in the offseason, Eric. What are we going to be hearing about? I know there's been a lot. Maury Brown's a pal of mine. He's been writing about the netting behind home plate and all that. And I know the digital side of this and how much money the thing's throwing off that you've already been through. But what are the big decisions for Rob Manfred here and the owners in this offseason where the NFL owners can't get along right now? We don't hear that sort of discontent with the baseball owners. They're all making money and seemingly nice and quiet heading into the offseason.
Sort of four big pieces here that I'm really watching, and I'll try to run through them here quick. Number one, the Marlins. We've got new ownership with Derek Jeter and Bruce Sherman, and a lot of decisions to be made, not the least of which including Giancarlo Stanton. So really going to be watching what's happening in that market and how Derek Jeter makes that transition from player to executive. Second, we've got some pace of play rules that are still going to be bandied about for 2018. I know the league's hard at work at trying to reach some sort of agreement with the union, and so we could see some things like limits on mound visits and a pitch clock, which is already in place in the high minors, that could be making its way into the major leagues beginning next year. Number three, some decisions need to be made on Chief Wahoo and the logo in Cleveland. A lot of people view that as offensive and racist, and it's kind of odd that we're approaching 2018 and that's still in existence. Manfred would like to see it gone. He's trying to make an agreement with Paul Dolan and the Indians ownership to try to make that happen. And last but not least, we're going to have some real executive movement in the league office. One of Rob Manfred's key lieutenants, Bob Bowman, who ran all of the revenue-generating activity at baseball, he last week announced that he's going to be stepping down at year's end. And so there's a whole bunch of decisions to be made with not only his duties, but what baseball is now doing is they're working with a management consulting firm, McKinsey, and they're really taking a hard look as to how everything should be structured throughout the league office. So there's a lot going on between now and spring training.
Well, I think the one thing that we saw going on this year was the Yankees reemergence, right? I know they're starting 6:30 game times. I saw that last week. I mean, that's kind of interesting in New York, where it usually takes longer to get everywhere, that they would actually try to step that up in the effort to bring the kids to the stadium. I tell you this, dude, if they started games at 6:30 in Baltimore, nobody'd be there. I mean, literally, just because of the traffic, and you have to drive to Bel Air to get your kid, or drive in from Bel Air with your kid. It's all you can do to be in your seat at 7:05. I mean, I love the notion that kids are going to embrace baseball, and I know that that's important to them. I don't know that baseball moves fast enough, or ends quick enough, or has enough pace to ever appeal to a 10-year-old kid on a broad scale ever again in our culture. But that, I tip my cap for them to try, but I do think 6:35 games are a little weird, Eric.
Yeah, I think it's an experimentation with really some of the lowest attended games that these teams will have all season. The Yankees are not alone. The Indians have played around with this. The Royals actually played around with this and then actually went back to the normal start times, to your point, after finding that people couldn't get out to Kauffman Stadium, which, as you know, is more in the suburbs. Getting out there from downtown or the western suburbs like Overland Park in that market, it just didn't quite work out the way they had hoped. And so they went back to the normal 7 o'clock, 7:15 start times. So I think the Yankees are going to experiment here with a few games in April. We'll see how it goes. It's a little different because we've got a robust mass transit system here in New York. But again, it's a bit of an experiment. It's a low-risk experimentation because, again, these are the lowest attending games that the team will probably have all year. And if it sort of helps a little bit in terms of some youth outreach, all the better. If nothing else, they've got some new data points.
Last thing for you, and I know you monitor this as well as anyone because you've been at this a long time, as have I. You're on the digital and the media and the technology side. Sabermetrics have really changed the game, right? And we're seeing, and certainly your former team down in D.C. firing Dusty Baker, that the nerds in the front office and the scouts in the front office, there's two different ways to run organizations, and I know we've tried this blended way where the nerds are going to tell the manager how to do things. Clearly, I mean, Buck's not a Saber guy around here, and the Orioles aren't run that way. They're run a little bit more old school, probably dripping from their owner, but there really is a crosshair going on here as to who's managing these teams, the general manager or the manager, and how they're being managed and how they're processing information, because there's more information from bat speed and arch of the ball and trajectory and spin and exit velocity, all of this nonsense that goes on, and how that gets processed. There's a real internal fight between young and old in baseball, right?
I'm not even sure if it's really a fight. I mean, I think analytics and sabermetrics, they're here to stay. And, sort of had an interesting story that we came out with last week that, the managers, you just look at the 6 changes that have happened this off season, the move towards your Dave Martinez's and your Alex Cora's and Gabe Kapler's in Philadelphia and so forth, that there's really a new model of a big league manager that's coming into the fore now, that's very often in their mid to late 40s, maybe early 50s, like a Dave Martinez. But the model, Alex Cora in Boston, 42 years old, recently finished up his own playing career, so he's got a real connection with the players that would be reporting to him. So the communication and the analytics are really kind of the two main buckets that are really prized now, and then you couple that with the youth, and that's really the sort of the prototype of the manager. And everybody out there, because again, this is sort of a copycat league like football and everything else, everybody's out there looking for their own A.J. Hinch, who's only 45, cut from this very same mold. So you got a guy like Buck Showalter. He really is a sort of an old lion here compared to these young guys coming in. But the nature of what the manager's gig now is, it's fundamentally changed, and I don't think it's going back.
I'm very close with a bench coach that I shall remain unnamed around here because I protect my sources. But, he told me I've been a bench coach 15 years in the league, and it's a completely different job than it used to be. You got to be at the ballpark at noon. You got to pour through stats. You're pouring through a needle in a haystack that may help you in a 2-out situation in the 7th inning on a 2-1 pitch. Like, literally, that's what you're searching for. mean, it's a lot more work being a coach or a manager than it used to be, right? A lot more nerd time, a lot more like being a football coach, quite frankly, with watching film and doing all of that we never, at least in my era back in the 90s when I used to be a real journalist before Angelos threw me out, I saw what football coaches did, and I saw what baseball coaches did, and I thought, boy, the baseball people have it a lot easier. That's changed, I think.
Totally. And actually what's happening now is coaching and managing in baseball and a lot of these other sports, but certainly baseball, it's resembling other sectors of business where the whole gig, whether it be insurance or technology or retail or what have you, the whole gig is pouring through those numbers and that data and trying to find the various trends and anomalies that are going to help you get to where you want to go as a business. And it's interesting that, and this is really where it's coming from ownership that, hey, I made $1 bazillion in this other thing using data and analytics to get where I got to be in a position to buy the team. We should do the same thing with the team.
He is Eric Fisher. He is a wealth of information out on Twitter. If you at all care about where all of your mass and money is gone, he is truly one of the only reporters out there keeping it lean and clean and reporting facts. You want to follow him at Sports Business Journal as well as at Eric Fisher. That's Eric with a C, Fisher, Fisher, SBJ, out on Twitter. He does all things sports, media, technology. Last question for you, this open-ended. I'm going to ask this of every baseball guest I have over the next 90 days. So this is my sort of a school of the new school question. Why do you love baseball at this? What do you love about baseball? I mean, I totally loved baseball that you were at a 103-degree night putting pictures up on your Twitter at Dodger Stadium during the World Series. I thought that was cool. But, I think as we all get older, we all see some hypocrisy in baseball. We see the business. We see the amount of money. We see how much it's changed. What do you love about it at this point, Eric?
Well, I still think it's the best game out there, and there's really kind of two things that jump out to me, that you've got this great combination of the individual man-on-man, pitcher versus batter, plus the team thing, because you obviously have to work together as a unit, defensively, as a lineup, and so forth. So that juxtaposition is still really compelling to me. And this is a game of failure, that your best players are still failing at the plate 7 times out of 10. And you've got to be tough as nails mentally. And you get up, this is the everyday game, and you're getting up knowing that you're probably going to fail 3 times out of 4 at the plate tonight, and to fight through that and still perform at a high level and do the hardest thing that I think is still hitting a 100-mile-an-hour pitch I still think it's the hardest thing to do in sports. The mental discipline, the physical discipline to do these things day after day, that's why it's so compelling to me, that what it takes to succeed at the major league level is just absolutely incredible. And
just as busy for the next 4 months as it will be when we get down to spring training. Always a pleasure, Eric. Thanks for making time for us. Appreciate it, man.
No problem.
You got it. Eric Fisher talking about his love of baseball. If you got some thoughts, you can tweet him at me or Facebook at me if you wish. Eric Fisher, SBJ, is the way to follow him, and it's sportsbusinessjournal.com. You can find me out in the bay at Toyota.com. Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you are. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That is all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life there. Don't forget any breaking news here during the bye week period. You'll get it first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis Kolatzis, of course, will be here on Thursday, driving you home from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports. Thanks. Hang on.
Let me just get it so I can refer to it.
All right, I'm in a bad spot too. So hang on a second here. Yeah, hang on. WNST, tough season of baseball here. General managers meetings up, and the Orioles add into the marketplace to hopefully attract some pitching around here. I tell you what, I've been trying to track this guy down for a couple of weeks, tried to get him during the World Series, but it's even more fun when it takes a few weeks to track somebody down because the story and the tales grow taller on down the line. Back in 2014, Sports Illustrated featured my favorite all-time uniform, the Tequila Sunrise Houston Astros, J.R. Richard, Jose Cruz, Nolan Ryan, unis of my youth, in predicting a 2017 World Series. The date was June 30, 2014, and now into November of 2017. Lo and behold, it's almost like Back to the Future or something like that. Ben Reiter is our friend. He comes on from time to time. He's a senior writer at Sports Illustrated, covering baseball amongst other things. We welcome him on. He is the smartest guy on earth here for having predicted this 3.5 years ago. Ben Reiter, I put it to you and I leave it to you. Brilliance or dumb luck? You tell me.
A little bit of both, Nestor. And I'm sorry if I was hard to pin down. It's been a crazy couple of weeks. But look, you cannot discount the luck factor here, right? Yes, in 2014, we proclaimed the Astros your 2017 World Series champs. Despite what a lot of people said at the time, we were not just throwing a hot take out there. We were not just trying to be controversial. We genuinely believed in the process that what was then the worst team anybody had ever seen pretty much had in place. But yeah, it was a little lucky, right? I mean, any team at the beginning of a season, if you look at the favorite in Vegas, they only have like a 20% chance of winning that given year. So to say that the worst team in league 3 years ahead of time will win, yeah, the percentage chance wasn't good, even if we fully believed in what they were doing, but I can say that we did believe in it.
Dude, I want to take a little way back here just to talk about how incredible this is, because this is the first time I've done this. I haven't looked this up until a moment ago. I pulled up the 14 Astros, and on June 30th of 2014, are you aware of what their record was at that point, or has this been brought up with you in the past?
I know they were very bad. I don't know exactly the record.
They were 36-48. They were 12 games under 500. They were 16 games behind. I'm guessing it must have been the Texas Rangers at that point. I mean, just a guess. Scott Feldman had just taken the mound for them the night before. That was a ballsy sort of prediction, but look, there's a million predictions that 3.5 years later, no one was going to rub your nose in it if the Astros won 72 games this year, right? Like, that wasn't going to happen. But when you walk the plank the way you did, this has been a fun little thing. I mean, I'll tell you that the craziest thing I've ever done happened this year. I was in Atlanta. I was in the upper deck. I was in Houston in the upper deck watching the Atlanta Falcons and the Patriots. And 3 hours before game time, I predicted the final score of the Super Bowl, and I predicted it perfectly. How about that?
Wow.
So I've never done that in my life. I've had a million predictions. Every week I predict something. Sometimes it's close and I get to do the our gang thing, and say how great I am and pat myself on the back. But I predicted the Super Bowl score to the number, even when they were down 3.5 touchdowns. So, I have that going for me. But to do it 3.5 years later, you're pretty good, Reiter. I got to be honest with you, man.
Well, I'm pretty impressed by that Super Bowl prediction, Nestor. But yeah, I mean, I guess this prediction actually got a lot of coverage and a lot of hate the moment it hit newsstands. And I think there were two reasons for that. One is that the Astros were just so unbelievably bad at the time. The worst team really since the lovable losers of the Mets in the early 60s. That's really how bad they were. Kind of a once-in-a-half-a-century type of horrible.
Well, their TV ratings came in at 0.
Right.
Like literally, that's how bad it was. The TV people were saying no one is watching them play in August, literally.
That's right. And number two is just, how high profile the spot in which the prediction was delivered to the world was. The cover of Sports Illustrated is a big deal. It's always been a big deal, and it's still been a big deal. And to take that prestigious real estate and devote it to, a prediction like this, and also kind of honor a club that didn't even seem to be trying to win at the time, ruffled a lot of feathers. But as I said, you can look up the article that I wrote at the time. It was 5,000 words, dug really, really deep, with almost unprecedented access, really, at least since Michael Lewis's Moneyball, into just what exactly the Astros were trying to do. And at the time, you really see there's logic to it. They had the right front office people in place. They didn't have the players yet, we should point out. You know, I went back and looked, and of the 25 guys who ended up on the World Series roster, only 11 of them were in the organization at any level, even all the way down to rookie ball back in 2014. It was really mostly about the plan, and we thought the plan had a chance.
Well, and Ben Reiter joining us here. You can follow him out on Twitter at Ben Reiter. That's Reiter. He, of course, a senior writer at Sports Illustrated and SI.com, and predictive of the cover in 2014. All right, so let's move forward here. Please let me know how the stock market's going to go and how my life's going to turn out and anything else that you could look into the crystal ball. But certainly this crystal ball of the offseason, let's turn this toward the other team in orange, our Baltimore Orioles. I don't expect the Sports Illustrated cover out in April to call the Orioles the 2020 champs anytime soon. And, I've been on the inside of this. My press pass has been taken away. You know this place has been run like Putin's Russia for a long period of time. But a lot of it's been deodorized by them winning the last couple of years. And there is some thought, well, Buck's a genius and Duquette did some good things. Although I would give Andy McPhail a whole lot more of the credit for what's going on around here, as well as Buck, as well as having some good players like Scope and Machado come through this thing. But now we go into this offseason, and I know you famously put your free agent list out, and then there's the question of which pitcher would ever sign a deal to come to Baltimore long-term, or which pitcher would the Orioles ever give a lot of money to, given Angelos' medical reports and all the nonsense that's going on. This is a really weird offseason around here. Showalter Duquette, after the only era of prosperity Angelos has really ever had that he can take credit for, and he's never been good at this. The family's never been good at this in figuring out strategy in offseason. Here in Baltimore, we don't feel like there's a long-term plan. I mean, at least in 2014, you went into Houston and peeled back the onion to say, well, if all of these things work, we'll win in 17. I don't know what the Orioles' plan is, and they never have press conferences, and they don't answer questions. It's a really strange time here to be talking about the Orioles, especially in light of the fact that the Yankees and the Red Sox really look to be loaded with money, with prospects, with smart people, with good baseball players, good young baseball players that they can retain. And, we look at Manny Machado, and, all we do is look at him and say, how's he going to look in a Red Sox or a Yankee or a Marlin or a Dot? He's going to be in another uniform at this point. And I find that to be very unfortunate for Orioles fans here this offseason because there's not a lot of hope going on around here, man.
Right. I understand all of what you just said. I guess what I would say is there's a chance this season, okay? I mean, I think that there is. And obviously a lot of it has to do with adding a couple of starting pitchers this offseason. And I understand everything you said about how it's hard to get pitchers to go there. But first of all, if you look at the free agent market, there are a few pitchers who can at least, who can at least hold the line. I guess that's what you're really looking for. Clearly you need Dylan Bundy and Kevin Gausman to be great, right? To really come into their own all at once. We've seen flashes of it before. Maybe this season is a season in which they can do it. But you just can't have a starting rotation with an ERA of 5.70. Like, there's just no way. The offense is excellent. You're going to have Machado for another year. You're going to have Adam Jones. You're going to have Scope. But you need to have a few guys who can throw 180 innings. They've got the bullpen in place behind them, assuming they don't trade any of the people at the back end. And as we see, baseball is increasingly about how you can string things together after you get a starter who can go through the lineup twice, right? That's really what you're looking. You're looking for a guy who can make it through 2 turns through the lineup before passing it off to a good bullpen. And if we look at my top 50 free agents, there are guys further down the list who can do that. I don't expect the Orioles to be players for the top starters, Yu Darvish, Jake Arrieta, even guys like Alex Cobb or Lance Lynn. But behind that, if you can add a couple, either by free agency or trade, and the free agents are guys like Andrew Kashner, Julius Chassin, even Jason Vargas, pitchers like that. If you can add a couple of them, Tyler Chatwood of the Rockies is a really intriguing one. Then maybe when you add that to the bullpen and to a still powerful lineup, you have something.
So you think they stay in? I agree with you. I don't think they're dealing anyone, but should they?
Oh, yeah.
Should they? Should they get 4 prospects for Machado? Should they be preemptive about Adam Jones? Should they be preemptive about Brock and Britton at this point if they can't get pitching?
Well, certainly not that way in spring training, right? I think that you got to add a couple of pitchers. And look, these guys will cost money. but I assume that the Orioles will be able to stretch to add a few mid-level starting pitchers. And I don't believe that trading Machado is going to be free agent in February or January, as opposed to July, will really impact the return that much. It certainly hasn't seemed to the past couple of seasons when you're talking about the top players dealt at the deadline, although usually those are pitchers. But I think essentially, if you're Buck and if you're Dan Duquette, you have 3 months, right? You have April, May, June. See how the team is then. Then if you get to July and they're competitive, great. You go for it. You got one more shot with Machado on board. It could shape up to be a wonderful summer and fall in Baltimore. If it doesn't work out, then you trade them. So these first 3 months are obviously going to be very key.
The Yankees have been the biggest story in the sport to me, and especially they didn't win makes it even more formidable. They found themselves this year. You talk about a team 15 months ago that was busting it up, breaking it up, A-Rod, Teixeira, all that nonsense going on. The story in baseball this year, as much as the Astros won and the Dodgers were there and the Rockies and the Diamondbacks, the story to me, especially in Baltimore, the Yankees and their reemergence from this period of dormant sleep. I pencil them in for 90-95 next year, and I can't imagine any time in the next 5 years that you won't be penciling them in for that.
Right. I mean, it seems to me if there's 1 year in which you might still be able to catch them in your future, it's this year. Just because I think that they kind of jumped their own timeline this past year. They were not planning necessarily to make a deep playoff run. I don't think they were planning to get 1 win from the World Series, but they're also not planning for Aaron Judge to become, in my opinion, the MVP, slightly edging Jose Altuve. That kind of lifted them into contention. But look, it's still about the young players. They're not going to have a big spending offseason. Maybe they'll go after Shohei Ohtani. But beyond that, they're trying to get under the luxury cap in order to spend big next winter when Machado is just one of 10 superstar free agents on the market. So I think if there's any season in which the Yankees might be catchable, it would be this season. After that, they're going to be terrifying for the next half decade or more.
What's Ohtani going to get, and who's going to give it to him, Ben?
Oh, man, it's so complicated just because the rules between the Japanese League and the Major League means that he cannot command anywhere near market value. So you're going to have a situation in which all 30 teams, including, I assume, the Orioles, will pony up the $20 million posting fee that you're going to have to pay to earn the right to negotiate with him. And then all of those teams, even the smallest of markets, it seems like will be able to pay him something within their budget to bring him aboard. So I guess ultimately it's really going to come down to Shohei has the say, which is a rare situation for a Japanese player. And I don't know, maybe he has some distant cousin in Baltimore or something and has always loved the town. I don't know. I envision some scenario in which he kind of has some unlikely connection to one of these cities and decides to go there. Maybe Koji Uehara has told him great things about Baltimore or something. I don't know.
Well, I tell you what, my favorite player, came over in Ichiro. So if it meant fresh sushi in my place, he could stay with me. He'd be fine with me. Put the Oriole cap on. Ben, congratulations on all of the sort of fun ribbing and pain that you endured over 3 years. And now you can say, I knew all the time. It was quite a great story. It was fun to follow your journey through all this stuff during the World Series, and great to have you on. I will bug you and darken your doorstep again before spring training, and we'll stretch it out, talk some more about the offseason. Thanks for coming on, Ben.
Look forward to it, Nestor. Thank you.
You got it. Ben Reiter joining us here from Sports Illustrated and SI.com. He is a senior writer there. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Ben Reiter. And I do want to point you toward the SI.com top 50 free agent list. That would be very, very helpful to say who are 47 or 48 guys the Orioles aren't going to get this offseason. You can learn more at SI.com and on Ben's Twitter page. That's Reiter, R-E-I-T-E-R, not like Writer like W-R-I-T-E-R, which is what we are. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, anywhere the internet travels. And if you're looking to golf this fall or winter or complete out the bye, or I'm in Green Bay this weekend and you want to go out and put a parka on and go play some golf, Compass Point Golf's a great way to do that down in Pasadena. Events, friendly folks, craft beers, and of course the turkey shoot next Friday. A great course close to home right down in Pasadena. It is compasspointgolf.com. Also a shout out to our friends in Essex serving up those delicious crabs and crab cakes. I saw Chad the Crab Man out on social media this weekend talking about how big his crabs were this week. They got a crab feast going on down there, an oyster feast in a couple of weeks as well. Al's Seafood in Essex, the oldest crab house in Baltimore, still there at Stemmers Run and Eastern Avenue at the foot of 702. See Chad the Crab Man, learn more at Al's Seafood. Appreciate their partnership and their support of all that we do here at WNST. You can find us out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world, no static at all, just like Steely Dan. Our morning newspaper ships directly to your email inbox digitally. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and planetfitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. There's a Planet Fitness near you. Also warm this winter. Last but never least, on Thursday, Dennis will be here doing the SSV on WNST, getting you ready for Lambeau Field this weekend. And of course, the WNST Tech Services also brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. No one doing it better. And of course, we're hoping for some good Orioles news here this offseason as well. But if there's any breaking news, you get that first. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.